Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Kraft, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Beyond Celiac. I'm here today with a fellow Valerie in honor of Mother's Day to talk about all things raising a celiac child. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a mom of two beautiful daughters. I'm based in the St. Louis area. And we have become part of this Beyond Celiac community for the last few years. I love being a part of the ambassador team and just being able to, share our story, be in communication with especially people in our local community who reach out, looking for advice, looking for guidance. My daughter was diagnosed when she was 6 years old. She'll be turning 13 this year. So we've been on this journey for a little while, and feel pretty good with where we're at. It's been a journey for sure. And so I understand kind of the phases of getting used to a lifestyle change. But I would say, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Valerie. Let's talk a little bit about that first phase. So, what was your daughter's journey to diagnosis like?
So that's a great question. And I know everybody's journey is different. And there are lots and lots of different symptoms associated with celiac disease. But for my daughter, so first of all, you should know she's super outgoing. She's friends with everybody and she has lots of energy. And so the first sign was that she just kind of stopped engaging. We have a lot of kids in our neighborhood and she would always be outside playing. And then all of a sudden she just kind of started pulling back and saying that she wasn't feeling well. And that just wasn't like her. I'll give you a day or two to maybe not feel great, but it kind of became more consistent. And she kept complaining that her stomach hurt. She wasn't feeling well. We tried basic comfort measures at home initially, lighter diet, think like crackers, think, water, think bananas, things like that. And we just weren't seeing any change. And so we did schedule an appointment with our pediatrician. And I think a lot of people get told this, but they were like, well, it's the holiday. She's probably not eating well, or she's constipated, or, all of these different things that it could be. And it really took, quite honestly, a frank conversation with the pediatrician to say, like, thank you. I hear what you're saying. We've done all of the things you've asked us to do, but something is still not right. I'm telling you, she's just different. Like her mood is different, her energy is different. And so that's when our pediatrician ordered a blood test for her. And she's like, you know what? And like something just clicked, I think, between our conversation and me advocating and saying that's not enough to just say everybody, especially 6-year-olds have stomach aches. They're going to school, especially young ladies. They get nervous, they get anxious sometimes. And that's just not what's going on here. And so it took that kind of back and forth, not necessarily accepting the answer, but challenging a little to say, I hear you, I respect you, but also something different is going on here. And so that's, like I said, when I think something clicked, and she ordered a blood test and she's like, I think it might be celiac disease, which at the time I was like, huh? What's that? And so we went through and her blood work came back, confirmed celiac. And then she had her endoscopy on Valentine's Day, which confirmed pretty severe blunting to the villi in her small intestines. And so that kind of started our journey. And it's it's funny and it's terrifying and sad looking back because I remember reading initially about celiac disease and going, okay, we have to cut gluten out of our diet. Like that is the only current treatment. And so we were like, okay, after tomorrow, we're starting fresh. Where do you want to go for dinner? Anything you want, right? And so knowing now what I know, I would not have done that. She wanted Burger King. So we went to Burger King, we got a burger, we got French fries, we did all the things, which made her feel awful. So as a mom, that was like oh, if I'd known now if I'd known then what I know now, we wouldn't have done that. But from that day forward, it was like absolutely, and our whole household has been on board with just keeping her safe and keeping her healthy.
What would you say some of the biggest challenges were after diagnosis? I'm sure we all as a community can empathize with them.
Yeah, I think the challenges for children and adults alike are similar in some ways and different in others. I think they're similar in just that our culture is based around food. Sociability is associated with food. We bring snacks, we make dinner, we have potlucks, we do all of the things to be social around food. And so adapting to that and kind of making changes to your own lifestyle, but then kind of educating your friends and your family and the people that you're around why you maybe aren't eating something that they brought, or why you're bringing your own meal, or those sorts of things. I think that's a challenge. I think especially though for kids, we have such a pizza and birthday cake culture, that has been a real challenge. Thinking it's easy, let's just order pizza. Well, it's different for us. And so I think that's been something we've worked through. I will say I don't feel like it's always easy, but you get used to it, and I will say, kind of off topic, but I just feel a little like the celiac diagnosis for my daughter has put us on a path to eating better, period. Prior to her diagnosis, if we were out running around for soccer practice and then gymnastics, the timing was always kind of tough. And it'd be like, let's just run through McDonald's, right? Because that's easy. But it forced us to really stop and evaluate how we were eating as a family. It wasn't terrible. We weren't eating out, 7 nights a week and eating completely junk food. But it forced us to reevaluate and introduce more fruits and like things that are just naturally gluten free, that once you kind of make that change, it's not as hard as it seemed at the beginning.
Absolutely. You make such a great point about it being different for kids and adults. It's, one thing to even just be 6 and have to explain to your friends. It's nothing to be an adult and have the language and your peers understand it. So what were the strategies that you and your daughter used to manage things like birthday parties or play dates or sleepovers?
Also a good question. So, and I think some of that has transitioned as she's gotten older. So she was 6 when she was diagnosed. She's turning 13 this year. And it went from a fully mom and dad managed situation. And we are right now in transition to her advocating more for her needs. I mean, our strategy then and now remains just communication, right? I have found more often than not just communicating, hey, thank you so much for the invite, asking about the menu, or just saying something to the effect of, we have different dietary restrictions. Are you having cake? Are you having brownies? I'll send something for my child that she can eat, but to have her feel included. If they're bringing cupcakes, I might make her a cupcake, right? And we'll kind of bake ahead sometimes and put things in the freezer. So it's like, hey, we've got a birthday party this weekend. Let's pull out, the cupcake or the brownie or whatever. That way she still feels included. And she's not necessarily having to do without. And I think as she's gotten older, I think the emphasis has been more on just her comfort level with asking questions and advocating for herself. She's so good at saying no, thank you, if she doesn't feel safe. And I think that's a really important thing to teach young kids with celiac disease, is to be comfortable saying no, thank you, especially to an adult. I know we teach them to honor and obey and respect, their elders and the leaders. But if there's something that might harm them, really empowering them to say no, thank you, or ask questions and say, can I get the first, little bowl of the fruit so that it's safe for me, things like that.
I think that's so incredible that you've, empowered your daughter to sort of take those first steps, especially as she grows into being a teenager and having some more freedom and autonomy. How did you sort of go about, or at least the beginning of that sort of almost advocacy transition?
Oh, she would tell you. Um, it was her saying, Mom, you have to stop. Like, I can do this. And she's very independent and she's very sweet. And so some of it was, somebody would try and ask her a question about her need, and I would just on reflex jump in and be like, oh, okay, here's what she needs, or I'll bring this, or let me help, or those sorts of things. And her getting honestly upset with me a few times to say, like, I want to speak for myself, and us sitting down and having a heart to heart and saying, okay, being vulnerable from the mom side and saying, this is something really important to me and to you. And I respect that you need some of your own independence and autonomy. And I'm going to start letting you take control. Not even letting you, but just acquiescing, like it's your turn. Because she's gonna go to college and at some point, and she's gonna leave me and she's gonna have to do it all by herself. And so I recognize that's something we have to start working on more, and teaching her to read labels and to, labels are hard, and our labeling standards are hard. And so trying to understand all the nuances, it's taken me 6 years and I still sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know if I don't know if I feel safe with this or not. I feel like 95% of the time I feel good about the choices in the food. And if I'm not sure, I just put it back, right? But she's going to have to start doing that. And so that's kind of our next phase, is like really encouraging her to read the labels, understand what's in the food that she eats, and also just opting for simpler, easier, healthier options. Meals is like the default easiest thing to do.
For sure. Another important aspect of sort of being a kid is school and going up, I'm sure, in that transition from elementary school to middle school. How have things at her school been like? How has she or you had to advocate for her?
Yeah. So every year I have sat down. Now she's in middle school. So it's changed a little bit in middle school, but from that very first year, we sat down with the nurse, with her grade level principal, with her teacher. I kind of wrote out an overview for them. It's a health plan. So we didn't initially have a 504 for her. We just have worked things out through a health plan until recently, and we can get to that. But just, this is what celiac is. This is what celiac disease is. Here's how it impacts her body specifically. So some of the symptoms that she encounters, like, please excuse her, right? If she's not feeling 100%, or she just needs to come to the nurse's office and lay down for a little while. We kind of defined different situations in the classroom, at lunch. I just made sure that everybody was aligned and in agreement that these are the things that she needs to be well. And she asks questions, or she needs something. One, they can always ask me. They can always call me if they're having a class party. And I know rules around that have changed a lot too, but especially post COVID. But if they're having a party, or the teacher's handing out snacks or candy, or they want some guidance on including her, or if I can send something, just all of it comes down to communication. And every single year, her schools have been very receptive, very open to kind of honoring what she needs. Moving into this year, we have written a 504 for her, and that's honestly more to set the stage for her in high school, where things move faster and teachers see even more kids, and just making sure that if for some reason she's out for several days, she's got accommodation to be able to make up her schoolwork, things like that. But overall, it really just comes down to communication. That's oversimplifying it, but just being transparent, understanding what her rights and her protections are, but also just trying to be a partner with the people that she's with during the day.
I think that's such a great way to look and think about it, and so wonderful to hear too that the school has been receptive. I know that's something that sometimes parents and kids themselves can struggle with. And we've talked a lot about some of those struggles, those worries, those hurdles we've had to cross, but are there any like wins or moments where you're like, yeah, this was great, or this went super well, that you'd like to share?
Um, Moments that have gone well. I think, anytime she gets to feel normal, I consider a win. And if that takes a little extra planning on my part, I'm willing to put the time in. It's really the inclusivity, and when somebody surprises you, right? With, hey, I know this is something you guys deal with. How can I help? Or, in a family environment or extended family, our larger meals are now mostly gluten-free to include her. And that's not easy for everybody, right? To understand. So when somebody reaches out and says, hey, I'm making this, tell me if these ingredients are safe, right? And it just, those things, they bless me, because they're thinking about her and trying to include her and just make sure that, like, it's really not that hard for other people to eat gluten-free food. I mean, most of the things that we eat are normal, right? They're things that just don't have wheat in them. The baked goods are different, right? But generally, when you think about like a dinner and a salad and a side, those sorts of things. So anyway, all that to say, I think just when people think about you, acknowledge you, try to help, or just try to be inclusive, I think that's some of the best places.
We hear from a lot of community members. Of course, there are times when family and friends don't quite understand, but it's almost kind of opening up a new avenue for people to be understanding, for people to show up for you when they take that extra step to learn and to accommodate. And I can only imagine how wonderful it feels for your daughter to be able to sit down at those big family dinners and to be able to eat, like you said, like normal with everybody else, what everybody else is eating. I'd love to know, Valerie, do you have any advice that you'd like to share, either for sort of your past self or for other mothers that are raising a child with celiac disease? I'm sure that itself could be a whole interview.
Yeah, oh, for sure. For sure. I've learned so much. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I think there are kind of two things that come to mind. One is give yourself grace. You're going to misread a label. You are going to melt down over not having something ready. You're going to be upset or hurt by not being able to be included in things. So just be gentle with yourself, right? I won't say it does get easier. It just, you become in control of your life situation. But be gentle with yourself while you're learning. And even now I have to remind myself, if we do decide to go out to eat and she does get gluten, she's very sensitive. Being like, well, I'm the one who made that decision. I need to remind myself, like, don't beat yourself up. Like we're learning together, we're growing together. And the other thing that has really been, it's totally different. The other thing that I think has been totally impactful is meal planning. That seems so simplistic, but as a mom, with two growing daughters, my husband, my dog, like all the things going on, I sit down on the weekends and I plan out all of our dinners, right? And then I think through, like, what does everybody want for lunch and what are some options? And then I put it on our refrigerator. And that's agnostic of any sort of food sensitivities. It's just kind of a life hack, really, is to sit down and say, okay, these are the things we're going to eat this week. That's what I buy for. And then when I'm done with work, it's like, oh, that's what we're making. And it takes a lot of that mental load off just to say, oh, we're having soup. Okay, all I have to do is start making the soup instead of being like, hey, what do you guys want for dinner? And then nobody knows. And then you're stuck eating cereal or you're eating, eggs and toast or, those sorts of things. So that has been really helpful for us as a family.
That's definitely a great tip, and you're right when you talked about earlier, you can't just if you're like, "We don't know, we'll go through the drive-through," you don't really have that flexibility with
Mhm.
celiac to be like, "Oh, we'll just eat out, and we'll just show up somewhere without any advanced planning or research." It's
Right.
very, very
Yeah.
different ballgame. Well,
Yeah, I mean, it has made a big difference, right? I will say more often than we're not, we're prepared, right? We at least have some options, or I even I just keep a notebook in my kitchen. That way I can look back and see, like, what did we eat last week? What did we eat the week before? That way it's even the planning is easy, or I'm not just like, what are we gonna make? How am I gonna feed these people? It's like, oh, you know what? Back in January, we had this soup and everybody loved it, and I can pull that. It's
mhm.
as you go, it gets easier. And then it's like stocking your kitchen and restocking your kitchen. Like you just kind of get in a rhythm, almost like a restaurant, like in an environment with a restaurant with kind of a set menu. And we have times where we get tired of what we're eating and then we have to go dig for new recipes and things like that. But just simplify, I think as moms, especially, we just carry a lot mentally, keeping track of schedules and needs and laundry and dinner and all the things. And when you layer in celiac, it's just one more thing, right? It's just becomes another thing to manage. And so anything that you can do to make that easier for yourself, I'm a big fan of.
Absolutely. Well, Valerie, thank you so much. I'm sure this is going to be helpful for so many of our community members. You are an absolute wealth of knowledge, and to you and to all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. And thank you so much for all you do, especially for those of you raising children with celiac. We know it is not easy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Bye, everyone.